All right, let's dive deep into Emerson, shall we?
Sounds good to me.
We're tackling self-reliance, and I have to say, some of this stuff, even over 150 years later, it still really makes you think.
Oh, absolutely. Emerson doesn't shy away from, well, from challenging the norms, you know.
No, he doesn't. So I guess the big question is, what's he really getting at with all this self-reliance talk?
I think it boils down to trusting yourself, like really trusting that inner voice we all have.
More than what other people tell you, even.
Exactly. More than societal pressures, more than expectations, more than, well, pretty much anything external.
He uses that iron string metaphor.
Yeah, that's I think, one of the most powerful images in the whole essay, saying we all have this internal compass, this intuition that's more reliable than any external guidance.
So what would that even look like? I mean, a world where everyone's just following their gut all the time.
Well, it's not about being reckless, right? It's about recognizing that inner wisdom and giving it more weight than the opinions of others or societal norms.
He does talk about, oh, what was it? That story about the painter who wrote poetry.
Right, that's a great example.
Hmm.
The painter's poetry wasn't technically brilliant, but it was original, it was genuine, and that's what Emerson valued, that raw expression of the painter's unique perspective.
See, this is what I mean. It makes you wonder, right? How many times have I dismissed my own ideas just because they felt a little too out there?
I think we've all done that. But Emerson would argue that those out there ideas, those unconventional thoughts, that's where true genius lies.
That's where the real innovation comes from.
Exactly. He even suggests that what's true for you, deep in your heart, might hold universal truths. Your unique way of seeing the world could resonate with everyone.
It's kind of a radical idea, isn't it?
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering. Just
Mhm.
imagine the possibilities if we all tapped into that individual truth and let it guide us.
So it's not just about trusting yourself, it's also about having the courage to be different, right? To not conform.
Absolutely. Emerson was, well, he was pretty adamant about that. Whoso would be a man, he wrote, must be a nonconformist.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is. And he backs it up with this powerful critique of society. He sees it as a joint stock company where people basically trade their individuality for security and acceptance,
So we all just become these cogs in the machine.
basically. And he argues that we lose our authentic selves in the process.
It's tough though, right? I mean, we're bombarded with messages about how we should be, what we should look like, how we should think.
He gets that. He acknowledges it's not easy to go against the grain. He even says the world will whip you with its displeasure if you dare to be different.
But we shouldn't let that stop us.
Definitely not. He encourages us to develop a thick skin, to not be swayed by those sour faces of disapproval. He'd rather embrace the devil's child within him, he says, than conform to those external pressures.
Wow, that's pretty intense. But his point is clear, right? Are we living a life that's true to ourselves? Or are we just going through the motions?
It's a question worth asking ourselves. Emerson believed true fulfillment comes from embracing your individuality, even if it ruffles a few feathers along the way.
Okay, so we've got the self-trust, the nonconformity, but there's also this emphasis on action, right? Living in the present moment.
Absolutely.
Well,
He's all about taking action, not just sitting around and thinking about things, but actually doing them.
he calls it foolish consistency, right? When we cling to beliefs even after they stop serving us.
Yeah, it's like holding on to an old coat that no longer fits.
Yeah.
He uses this really vivid image, he says. Leave your theory, as Joseph his coat in the hand of the harlot, and flee. It's about being willing to let go of outdated beliefs and run towards new experiences and ideas.
That's quite an image.
It is, and it makes you think, right? How often are we stuck in the past or worrying about the future? How can we break free from those mental traps and really focus on the now?
I like that. Focus on the now. And then there's this whole idea of a divine spark within each of us.
Right, this is where it gets really interesting. Emerson believed that every individual is a unique expression of the divine. It's like there's this wellspring of potential, of creativity residing in each of us. He calls it spontaneity or instinct, the source of all genius, virtue, and life itself.
Wow. And he even says that we're receivers of its truth and organs of its activity. It's almost like this divine energy is flowing through us, and our job is to just let it express itself.
It's a beautiful idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it raises the question, how do we tap into that? How do we better connect with that inner wisdom and intuition?
That's a good question. And then, of course, Emerson doesn't hold back when it comes to critiquing, well, pretty much everything. I mean, he talks about travel, education, even our pursuit of wealth.
He's not against progress, but he's very wary of becoming too reliant on institutions and technology. He sees true wealth as residing within the self-reliant individual.
He uses that example of the, was it a sturdy lad from New Hampshire?
Yes. He contrasts him with the city dolls, who are kind of fragile and dependent on societal structures.
So he's saying we're losing that rugged individualism in our modern world.
It's something to think about,
Mm.
for sure. And then there's his perspective on prayer. He redefines it, calling true prayer a contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view.
So it's not about begging for favors.
No, it's about recognizing the inherent goodness in everything. He even says that praying for personal gain is like meanness and theft.
It all goes back to that interconnectedness he talks about.
Exactly. There's no separation between the individual and the divine, in his view.
Okay, so instead of pleading with some distant god, we should see prayer as aligning ourselves with this universal force that flows through everything.
That's a good way to put it. And he applies this same self-reliance to our actions. He criticizes dwelling on past mistakes and what he calls base sympathy.
So he's not against empathy.
No, but he believes it should be an active force that empowers others, not just passive pity. True strength lies in helping others help themselves.
Then he dives into beliefs and creeds, comparing them to a disease of the intellect.
Right. He's wary of clinging too rigidly to any one belief system. He believes we all have the capacity to develop our own unique understanding of the world.
So not necessarily anti-religion, but definitely against dogma.
More like open to a more fluid, personal understanding of spirituality. He uses this analogy of sunlight, how it can find its way into any space, no matter how tightly shut. Truth, for Emerson, is like that sunlight, universal and uncontainable.
Okay, I like that. And this leads to his critique of the superstition of traveling.
He wasn't against travel itself, but he challenged the idea that we need to journey to far-off lands to find ourselves. He believed the truly wise person carries their inner world with them, feeling at home wherever they are.
So running off to Italy won't magically solve your problems.
Nope. The real work happens within, regardless of your location. And this ties into one of his most powerful statements. Insist on yourself. Never imitate.
He was a big believer in originality.
Absolutely. He argued that imitating others is like borrowing a talent. You never truly own it. True greatness comes from cultivating your own gifts and expressing your authentic self.
He even used Shakespeare as an example, saying no one could have taught him to be Shakespeare.
Right. He had to tap into his own unique genius. And Emerson believed we all have that potential.
Okay, so this idea of self-reliance, it extends beyond the individual, right?
Yeah.
He talks about society as a whole.
He makes this very provocative statement. Society never advances.
Wait, he's denying progress?
Not exactly. He's pointing out that every gain comes with a loss. He compares a civilized American to a naked New Zealander.
Meaning
that with all our advancements, we've lost some of that primal strength, that connection to nature, that ability to rely on ourselves in a fundamental way.
it's almost like he's saying we've become too comfortable, too reliant on external things.
Yeah, he uses those vivid examples. We build coaches, but lose the use of our feet. We have watches, but can't tell time by the sun. We have libraries, but can't remember things without our notebooks.
It does make you think, doesn't it? Are we really progressing if we're losing those essential skills, those core abilities?
It's a valid question. And it ties into his critique of over-reliance on property and government. He sees those external structures as crutches, preventing us from developing our full potential.
So instead of focusing on what we have, we should focus on who we are.
Exactly. Cultivate those inner resources, that living property that can't be taken away.
And what about this idea of fortune, of luck? I mean, surely he doesn't think we can control everything that happens to us.
Well, he does believe we have more control than we think. He argues that by aligning ourselves with truth and justice, we can actually create our own good fortune.
So it's about taking responsibility, not playing the victim.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our agency, our power to shape our own lives.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of this connects. It's this overarching philosophy of self-reliance that permeates every aspect of our lives.
From our personal beliefs to our interactions with the world around us.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground here. And I think we're just scratching the surface of Emerson's ideas.
Oh, definitely. There's so much more to explore. He had some pretty interesting thoughts on property and government, too.
Yeah, like he almost saw relying on those things as a weakness, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Almost a lack of faith in yourself, you know? He really wanted people to shift their focus.
From what they have to who they are.
Exactly. It's about building up those internal resources.
A living property,
Yeah, the stuff that can't be taken from you.
no matter what.
Exactly.
And he wasn't too keen on following the crowd either, was he?
No, not really. He thought real strength came from standing alone, relying on your own judgment.
Even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong.
Especially then, maybe. He uses this great analogy about, standing on your feet versus standing on your head. You can only be strong and really get things done when you're, grounded, standing on your own 2 feet.
That inner confidence.
Yeah, exactly. And it all ties into his views on luck and fortune.
He didn't believe in luck.
He did, but not in the way we usually think about it. He thought you could kind of make your own luck.
How so?
By living a life that's aligned with truth and justice and all that, you create good fortune by being a good person, basically.
So it's more about taking charge than just waiting for good things to happen.
Exactly. No more victim mentality.
I like that.
It's empowering, isn't it? You have the power to shape your own life.
That's a pretty powerful message. It's timeless, you know?
It really is. It's as true today as it was back then.
So we've gone over a lot of Emerson's ideas about self-reliance, but like, how do we actually use this stuff?
Yeah, it's all well and good to talk about it, but how do you actually live it?
He doesn't really give you a step-by-step guide, does he?
No, it's more about the mindset.
Yeah.
Trusting yourself, questioning everything, being true to yourself even when it's hard.
It's internal,
Yeah.
but it affects how you interact with everyone, with the whole world.
Oh, absolutely. He wanted us to rethink everything. Religion, education, work, stuff, all of it.
Make your own path.
Right. It's a quiet revolution, It starts inside you and then it spreads out.
So I guess if we had to boil all this down, it's not about being a lone wolf or anything.
Right.
It's about trusting yourself, that inner voice,
Knowing who you are and what you believe.
and letting that guide you.
Yeah.
One of the best things I think is that it makes you feel like you have the power to choose.
Like you said, it's empowering.
You're not just stuck,
Yeah.
You can decide who you want to be, what you want to do.
We have agency.
We can create our own lives.
And that's something everyone needs to hear.
Yeah, it's a message we could all, I think, use a little more of these days.
Absolutely. When everything feels so, so chaotic, his ideas are, they're refreshing.
It's like he's saying, hey, you don't have to follow the crowd.
Yeah. Yeah. Like forge your own path, blaze your own trail, all that.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our look at self-reliance, what would you say is the most important thing for people to take away?
That's a good question. I think it's remembering that you have power, the power to choose to create your own life.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, any of that. It applies to everyone.
Emerson might have been writing over 100 years ago, but it's still so relevant today.
It really is, and I think anyone who actually sits down and reads Self-Reliance, they'll find something in there that speaks to them.
So I guess our challenge to everyone listening is to think about where you might be giving your power away. What could you be more self-reliant about?
Yeah, how can you really step into yourself?
Yeah.
Be your most authentic self.
And hey, go back and read Emerson again sometime. You'll probably find new stuff every time.
It's worth it.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep trusting yourselves.